Hi there, Hayden here from foulsonfantasy.com, and first off I would like to apologise for my lateness in this video. I've been away for a little while, but I'm back now, and I would like to assure you that all the tutorials that people have requested or the tutorials that I have planned, such as my camera tracking tutorial, as well as a new series on putting in architectural elements such as buildings and cities into real life footage. Okay, but enough of that. Let's get on to why I've made this video. And the reason I've made this video is because something very special has happened, and that is that Blender 2.8 has come into beta. Now, for those of you who do not know, Blender 2.8 is the newest version of Blender, and it is by far one of the best iterations of Blender that we as a community have seen, well, in forever. I would wager a healthy amount that this upgrade is even more spectacular than the upgrade from the 2.4 release to the 2.5. And if you don't know what that looks like, well, I don't know. You know, it was another age back then. Anyway, let's get back onto topic. The first thing that will strike you about Blender 2.8 is the UI. The UI is crisp, it is clean, and it is organized. At the top of the screen, you will find tabs. These tabs are essentially workspaces. So we have our layout, our modeling, our sculpting, UV editing, the lot. So if I just jump back into the previous version of Blender, you'll see that we can actually still access something similar, but the horizontal and in-your-face layout of this new workspaces makes it a function that I feel a lot of new people and a lot of old people are going to use quite a lot. Another large and immediate change that you may notice is the layout of our properties. Instead of the horizontal layout of all our menus and sub-menus, we now have this really nice and clean looking vertical tab system. So as you can see, this is the old version, and what the old version tended to do was it tended to overflow sometimes, and you may miss a few buttons here and there because there was so much jam-packed into the menu by the end. So making this horizontal, I think, is a fantastic change. Now, something that I don't feel is fantastic and is missing from this is I can't use my mouse wheel to scroll up and down through these tabs. Upon seeing this structure, I was instantly reminded of the menu system in the previous version of Blender, and in that, as you can see, I can scroll up and down the tabs. Yes, this is a little thing, but it does get a bit on my nerves at times, especially when I just want to scroll down really quickly to something of my choice. And I feel that the addition of this function would be a welcome and user-friendly addition to an already fantastic change. Another change, and perhaps my favorite, is the addition of the collections. Now, collections are essentially folders that you can place objects, lights, cameras, anything. You can even place collections within collections. This is a fantastic tool for organizing your scene and your objects within your scene. Before, what I would have to do was create an empty and then assign objects to an empty as their children. It was a very convoluted workaround sometimes, and it got a bit messy. Also, another thing is that a lot of Blender users actually don't use this function of Blender. It's actually just glossed over because it became too unwieldy if you had a lot of objects in your scene. So the addition of this is, I think, a fantastic one, and it's going to make a lot of Blender users use this more and actually reap the benefits of it. So thank you to whoever put this in. Another change that is perhaps the flagship change of Blender 2.8 is the renderers available to you. The renderers available to you by default are Cycles and Eevee. Eevee is the replacement for the Blender internal engine, and for the most part it is Words cannot express how amazing this engine is. So it is a PBR biased render engine that has incredibly fast render speeds, and the best thing is its material nodes are exactly the same as cycles. So theoretically, a material made in the Eevee engine will work in the Cycles render engine. That cross compatibility is going to be very powerful. So you'll be able to draft out what your scene is going to look like in Eevee and then render it out in Cycles if that is the path you so choose. Or alternatively, you can just render purely in Eevee because that is how powerful it is. And I'm going to be making a completely separate tutorial on using the Eevee engine, so how to set up reflections, volumetrics, things like that. So stay tuned for that in the near future. Now, one downside to this upgrade is that there are a lot of functions in Blender Internal that I actually really like and frankly are not in the Eevee engine. One such thing is halo materials. Now I love halo materials, and for those of you who do not know, halo materials are essentially a vertex based material in the original Blender Internal, and you could apply a texture to these vertices, even a image sequence, and then have that image sequence play out. These are really great at creating not realistic but incredibly fast particle systems. So faraway smoke plumes or explosions, things like that. And they actually looked really good if you do some pre-rendering beforehand. So what I mean by that is if you actually rendered a explosion in Cycles using voxels, and then you applied it to a halo material in the Blender Internal engine, you'd get an incredibly great looking halo material, and in turn a great looking particle system. And I've used this technique before, especially if you take a look at my space battle video, which was made, nearly 2 years ago now. It uses halo materials for all the explosions, and they look pretty good. So yes, it's essentially my only want out of the new Eevee engine, and that is the revival of the halo materials, make them better than ever. If we can bring those back, I'll be 100% on board with this new engine. Okay, let's get back to Blender 2.8. Another difference is that when we render now by pressing F12, it won't change our window into a render window, but instead it will bring up a new one by default. Now, this function was actually in original 2.79, but you had to into user preferences and turn that on. If you do want that same window now, you have to go to the rendering workspace, and as you can see, my already pre-rendered frame is waiting for me. Also, while we're in this window, I might take a moment to highlight another change, and that is our window type is no longer in the left bottom corner of the window, but it has been moved to the left top. At first, this took a while for me to get used to, but ultimately it's just a small change and it shouldn't take too long to acclimatize to that. Okay, before this video turns into a 20-minute video, I'm just going to end this here because this video was primarily to serve as my initial impressions of Blender 2.8. I hope that it has helped you form your own opinions about this new release. And I also wanted to make a video just to get back into the swing of making videos, because they actually do take a little bit of time, and you pressing that like button and commenting and telling me what you like or dislike actually really goes a long way and helps me improve. And before I go, I would just like to point out that my website, which I've been actively building for quite a while now and still am building, it's still a ways away from being completed, but I'm trying to find the best way of archiving all my tutorials on it. So you can find my website at www.falzonfantasy.com, and then if you do /tutorials, you get to my tutorial section, which is still underdeveloped and needs a lot of work, but perhaps you can point me in some good directions in which way I should archive my videos. So thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, as always, please like, and if you would like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much. This is Hayden Falzon from Falzon Fantasy, signing off.